I see my clock going already, so I'm going to get right to it. Good morning. Thank you, Chief Logan, for the warm welcome and for the privilege to be here on your traditional territory. It is great to see so many familiar faces in the room, including representation from a number of Indigenous nations, many of whom, like my community, are working to advance sustainable energy solutions for the betterment of all. What inspires me most about events like this is that one single idea, one discussion or relationship can spark a step change in how we grow BC's resource sector. In fact, so much has advanced for my nation since I stood up here 4 years ago. Then I spoke about the opportunities before us to help change the course of history for my people and Indigenous people everywhere. What we are doing to support LNG and economic development in our territory so that we could fill the poverty gap and be prosperous on our own terms. And I am as unapologetic today as I was when I say that economic development and reconciliation is the path to true healing for our people. We begin 2024 with so much optimism for the future, largely driven by a significant advancement of our Cedar LNG project and success of other projects. With recent completion of the Coastal GasLink and LNG Canada nearing completion, we are proving that we can deliver a sustainable LNG industry. Yet there is so much more we can do to elevate the role of Indigenous communities in advancing a sustainable natural resource sector that tackles climate change with meaningful solutions. It can be a win-win undertaking and one we must work on together, one that ensures the benefits of LNG remain within our borders and our communities. To get to the point where we're at now, as so many of you know, we had to fight for what was long described as a share and a say. Because of visionaries like Heber Maitland and Ellis Ross, to name a few, we are turning the page on history and are in charge of our economic future. And I am heartened to see other nations take charge as well, led by leaders such as Karen Ogen and Eva Clayton, whom I have the privilege of joining in a panel after this. The Haisla have made great strides through our agreements with proponents such as LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink, who have seen the value and responsibility of properly listening to First Nations and in turn share their success with my community and others. Our nation recognizes, though, that agreements only get us part of the way. We have a bigger vision that provides better education, better healthcare, better justice, and a better future for our people. And for us, better means being treated equally with the same rights and privileges. We recognize the incredible opportunity to put our efforts towards projects that will reduce the world's reliance on coal and higher emitting fuels. That is what led us to support LNG in the first place and pursue Cedar LNG as owners. With Cedar LNG, we are proud to provide an Indigenous-led solution to help drive down global emissions. A project that helps ensure Canadian natural gas is liquefied in Canada with lower emissions than if it would be exported to the US, so that benefits accrue to First Nations and Canadians alike. For those who argue that LNG is not the answer, global emissions will continue to grow until there are viable alternatives to coal use in Asia. And I am proud that our community and others like mine are taking the lead to responsibly produce those alternatives. As owners, we have ensured our values have guided decision-making so that Cedar LNG is the cleanest project possible. Values that are shared by our partner, Pembina Pipelines. One of the most important decisions we made was to power the facility entirely with renewable energy. This decision alone will enable us to produce LNG with one of the lowest carbon footprints in the world. It is a decision that should be easier for industry and other developments to make. but is not currently due to capacity constraints, availability of supply, and other factors. So I hope today's panelists will discuss how we can ensure our renewable electricity system can grow to meet the needs of clean energy transition. I am proud to report that Cedar LNG has reached a critical time with the achievement of major milestones this past year. Last spring, I stood alongside Premier Eby, Ministers Osborne and Heyman, Pembina, and our hereditary chiefs, as it was announced that we would be the first Indigenous majority-owned LNG facility in the world to receive an environmental assessment certificate. Since then, we have signed memorandums of understanding for long-term liquefaction services for the project's total capacity. And most recently, we announced the selection of our EPC contractor, one of the last few hurdles to clear before we take a final investment decision. Ooh. Sorry, that one just made me shake a little bit more. In the coming months. I look forward to returning to next year's forum and sharing news about the construction of Cedar LNG and the many Indigenous benefits being realized as a result of the project. While our focus right now is advancing Cedar LNG, that is not the end of our journey. It is the start of how we want to work together to advance reconciliation and achieve equality for Indigenous peoples everywhere. By being owners in these projects, we can meaningfully contribute to a cleaner and more just world and restore our people's culture, traditional knowledge, and high quality of life. We can train our people with the skills needed to secure well-paying, family-supporting jobs on Cedar LNG and other projects. We can build critical community infrastructure like our new health center and our youth center in Haisla territory. And something I am profoundly impacted by is our ability to fund programs that reconnect our people to their culture and our language, a language that virtually disappeared with my generation. We are reigniting our potential through culture and language, and that is perhaps the most powerful thing of all. When I think of my daughter speaking Haisla with my grandchildren, that is what drives me each and every day. Cedar LNG has given us an incredible opportunity, one we are committed to sharing benefits and lessons with other nations, industry, government, and communities who value the power of collaboration. A future that recognizes the strength of Indigenous people bring to shaping our world based on values of sustainability and environmental protection. You've heard from me, but I want to ensure you have an opportunity to hear from our community. Can you please play the video?
I've lived here my entire life. It is full of memories, full of stories.
Haisla people are good people. I'm taught to respect everybody.
We're a proud people, and we're a patient people.
Culturally, we've always been strong. We have our Nuyum, is our Haisla laws.
As young children, we are taught to take care of our land and not to take more than we need. And we want to be a part of solutions. The project came to fruition sitting in a boardroom in Calgary in order to reach a goal of maybe one day owning and operating our own LNG facility in our territory. From that experience, we were able to implement a lot of our cultural values and our principles and having an actual say. We want to work together to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our people because we've been on the sidelines for far too long. When you hear my Auntie Marilyn speak or my Baba Nelson speak, they recognize the value. They grew up at a time where we weren't included in the prosperity that was being taken from our territory.
Growing up with what I had, what we had, which was not much. And now you look at it and you say, hey, you know, look at all this. That's a big industry. I feel so much pride in our reserve for stepping forward and saying, this is what we want for our people.
We say, yeah.
Following a multi-year process, we've issued an environmental assessment certificate for Cedar LNG. This will be the first Indigenous majority-owned LNG export facility in Canada and the largest First Nations majority-owned infrastructure project in the country.
Cedar LNG is just the start of our journey towards a net zero future, and one we are grateful to be partnered with Pembina Pipeline. Pembina is our chosen partner because they recognize the strength Indigenous people bring to shaping our world based on values of sustainability and environmental protection.
Economic reconciliation is what it's all about. We're not asking to be more than, we're just asking to come back to level. We've always been proud, we've always been self-sustaining, and now to have validation of the strengths that we've always had, it feels like a blooming, really.
It is an understatement when I say this is a very proud day for me. I am here because I want to do what is right for my community and for the generations to come.
We have to do things together as people, Haisla people.
The future is really bright. I can see the difference right now.
There's no limits like there used to be. The possibilities are endless.
We'll have these financial resources to be able to send our kids off to school or send them to wherever they want to go.
We're able to do that through the revenues generated to provide programs and services to ensure that they learn their true Haisla identity. Cedar is independence. It's a legacy.
Never fails, I always get emotional when I see our people talk about the success and to hear firsthand from them. But within that video, I actually saw my youngest daughter there, so it was great to see. Indigenous people in Canada will be energy providers of the decarbonized future, protecting and restoring our ecosystems while driving prosperity. But we can't succeed alone. Without collaboration, we can't innovate to drive down the world's carbon footprint. Our nation has had the ability to benefit from LNG developments in our territory, but let's not let it be the last. There are so many other LNG projects with Indigenous leadership in BC that have the potential to make a significant impact on the future of Indigenous people and also help fight climate change. If we don't support a growing, sustainable LNG industry in BC, led by First Nations, our resources will go down south with little to no benefit to our people or the environment. Before I close, I would like to thank our partner on Cedar LNG, Pembina Pipelines, for being here today and for respecting our values and supporting our reconciliation journey. I would also like to thank the provincial government who has worked with us to help move our project closer to reality. And thank you to everyone for coming here this week and being part of the fabric required to advance a truly sustainable LNG future for Indigenous people and all of our communities. LNG continues to offer incredible opportunities for us to work together to make a meaningful mark on reconciliation and address climate change. Let's keep fighting for our share and our say. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you so much, Crystal. It's now my pleasure to invite Jamie Conrad, President of Tyrod Industries, the sponsor of this session, to come and introduce the moderator of our panel, Indigenous Leadership in BC's LNG Industry Pioneering Global Solutions. So if I can see Jamie coming up. While Jamie is joining me on stage, I'd like to remind you that we will be using Whova for our Q&A sessions. So the information on login is on the back of your program. And lastly and quickly, if you're parked in the library parking lot, please move your car to the other lot or you may be towed. Thank you.
Good morning. We are very fortunate to be here today on the beautiful unceded ancestral lands of the Clayton to hear from these incredible panelists and Indigenous leaders of the LNG industry to discuss and learn the latest news, trends, and opportunities for this sector. On behalf of Tyrod Industries, we are honored to sponsor this session as we are a proud oil and gas provider, service provider in BC for over 15 years. We're very committed to building strong relationships and partnerships to drive sustainable solutions. And I believe that's what most of this forum is all about. It is my pleasure to introduce Shannon Joseph, Chair of Energy for a Secure Future, an initiative that brings together Canadian business leaders, Indigenous peoples, organizations, and experts in conversation about energy and building a secure future for Canada. Please join me in welcoming Shannon Joseph, moderator for this session.
Is the mic working? Yes. Thank you very much, Jamie and Tyrod, for your support. I want to start off quickly by thanking Elder Darlene for her remarks this morning, and Chief Logan and the Haisla Tene Council for their welcome. I'd also like to quickly introduce my panel today. I was told that this is the first time there is an all-Indigenous panel talking about building the future of LNG in Canada, so that's very exciting. So we've just heard from Crystal Smith. So I'd like to introduce Karen Ogen, who is the President and CEO of First Nations LNG Alliance, which represents multiple First Nations across Canada who are pursuing LNG as a pathway to prosperity, to environmental protection, with a focus on environment, consultation, and engagement. And Karen, as many of you know, had served as elected chief of the Wet'suwet'en between 2010 and 2016. And right to my right is President Eva Clayton of the Nisga'a Nation. She's been president since 2016, and before that has worked for many years for the nation to advance its prosperity and well-being. The Nisga'a are, of course, lead proponents and owners of Silism's LNG, and along with their partners, Rockies LNG and Western LNG, are advancing a really exciting project that we're going to hear more about today. So, to kick things off, I think it's really important to understand the journey of how these projects have come into these communities and been taken ownership by communities. So maybe I'd like each of you to just talk to us a bit about how did your nation, or Karen, in your case, your members, come to be involved in LNG? Why are these initiatives important to your communities? Eva, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's always good to be here with my friends, Crystal and Karen. And before I answer, I want to congratulate the Haisla. It's a milestone that Haisla has taken. Congratulations. The Nisga'a Nation has The Nisga'a Nation has long tried to establish an economic base in the Nash Valley. And it's one that we want to do in a way that agrees with our principles and our values as we live in harmony with our lands. And we move forward to building that economic base. It's very important for our nation. Not only for our nation, but the North.
Karen, anything to add?
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I, too, want to echo thanking the Clayton Tene, Chief Darlene and her council, and her people for allowing us to conduct our business on your territory. The question was about how I've become involved with LNG. My background is in social work. I ran for chief for my community 2010 at the request of my mother, my late mother, and got into politics, which is something I just didn't want to do at all. But that's when your mom tells you to do something, you do it. So we started to learn about LNG in our community. I have to say that we've had railways, transmission lines, highways running through our community with absolutely no benefits coming back to our community. In fact, our community, we were given swampland. We couldn't build any houses on swampland. So when I became the chief, one project had already been signed off before my time, Pacific Trails Pipeline, in 2009. And so Coastal GasLink had come along. You know, we weren't sure if we should resist or sit and listen and hear what they had to say about LNG. Our community knew absolutely nothing about LNG. We didn't know. Every time people would mention the word pipeline, they'd ask, is it oil? So that was how we started the First Nations LNG Alliance, along with Crystal way back when. And so we wanted to sort of educate people on what LNG is and what it isn't, so that people could make their own informed decision in whether they support LNG. One thing I didn't expect is that for it to be so controversial. It was very controversial. Media had pitted elected and hereditary chiefs against one another, and that's not what we signed up for. It was about the people. Every leader in this room, the job is to look after the people. Whether it's hereditary, you look after the people in the land. Whether you're elected, you continue to look after the people in the land. So from my perspective, both forms of leadership must work together if our nations are going to move forward. Ms. Sai.
Thank you, Karen. Crystal, did you want to add anything that maybe you didn't get to mention in your opening about how your nation came to be involved in these projects, why it's important?
I think that thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be on the panel with Karen and Eva. I think that our two leaders here spoke a lot about the opportunity and it being about our people. Reliance on any other level of government hadn't provided solutions to any of our communities in regards to providing programs and services that met our people's needs. And we found that opportunity through economic development. We're very fortunate where our Haisla territory resides, being a port that doesn't freeze. And we had many opportunities. LNG and our leadership at the time did their due diligence, not only at the leadership level, but more at a community level as well, by informing our members exactly which commodities and what proposals were being brought to our attention in terms of ECDEV. LNG was the choice because of the less impacts and how it dissipates if an accident were to occur. So essentially we educated, it was acceptable by our people, but we also informed them about the hope and the potential prosperity that would come from a project such as LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink. So we saw the jobs, the training, but as I stated in my opening comments, the most important and inspiring aspect of witnessing and being very fortunate to be in my position to be able to see is our people speaking our language and revitalizing our culture.
No, I think that's such a key point, and it's something people might not be as aware of. President Clayton, can you talk about some of those cultural benefits that you either have seen or are hoping to see in terms of the project?
Thank you. The cultural benefits of the Nisga'a Nation will only be more enhanced as we move forward with the project. We've already been establishing the Nisga'a Language Cultural Center in Lackald's the Nisga'a community of Lackald's and it's going to be, it's still in the process of being built, but as we move forward with the construction of that center, there is ongoing programs that are in place so that our people and our young people will continue to speak the language. We continue to have our elders go out into the field to teach the language. What I've noticed is that many of our elders that have been teaching Nisga'a language are aged. They're aging out. And so now we see a new generation of young people coming up to speak the language and teach the language.
All right. Did you want to jump in, Karen?
Yeah, I could mention, during my tenure as chief, we set up a 4-pillar system within our community that's still going strong yet. And part of that was education and training. We want to make sure that our people have careers at the end of these projects, and we can't emphasize that enough. This is one major project. There's going to be other major projects, so we want our people out the gate. So that's really critically important to us. The second was language and culture, which both Eva and Crystal have talked about. We're at a place in our community since the pandemic where we have maybe 1 or 2 speakers left, fluent speakers in our community. That's really not good news. So we want to be able to promote our language in our community and continue promoting our culture in our community, because we have very few people in my generation that have traditional names, and we need to continue with that path. The other piece was health and wellness. We can't emphasize that enough. You know, when the 215 kids were found, it hit BC and Canada in a different way, to realize that people, all of us, have unresolved trauma, and we must address it to help our communities become well again. And housing. So that's what those projects mean to our community, a small community. You know, it helps with our housing. I can say that we have clean drinking water now, and this council still continues to support our people with these 4 pillars. Ms. I.
Thank you all. I think it's so key for people to see at the end of the day, these projects are really about empowering nations to transform themselves, to pursue their own goals. I think before we get into maybe some of the exciting developments in all these projects, and all of you are working on different aspects of this, I wanted you to speak really, each of you, about how you've seen the values of your community be reflected in the way the projects are done. Because I think there's a perception out there that somehow, you know, you guys are getting signed up by these big energy people and that your values are not actually coming into place. So can each of you maybe take a minute to say how you have now and your nation has transformed these projects? Eva?
Thank you. For decades, the Nisga'a Nation has believed that LNG will be a transformational opportunity for us to build our economy. Right from out of the gate, we have been walking with our people. We have been walking with our elders to keep the communications open. We've had consultations, and we will continue to have consultations with our people, because it's their future that we're talking about. And they fully understand that. We have a team. We have a project team, if I may, headed up by our Secretary-Treasurer, Charles Morbin, Bartek Kayens, and our CEO, Andrew Robinson. They're at table 6. They've been doing a lot of work to get the information and have the information to the government being brought up to date on every step of the way. There are training up programs in place for the Nisga'a and each of the communities through our Nisga'a Economic Skills and Training program. And we walk with our people, we hear our people. Our people have been involved from the early stages of the project. So we are keeping them informed. We hear the concerns, and we hear the type of training that they would like to see. Thank you.
During my tenure as the chief, we did a traditional land use and occupancy study, which took our elders at the time out onto the land, into the territory. And they let us know which areas we could go into and where there was no-go zones. And I think that was very important to us, you know, because First Nations are viewed as stewards of the land. Who better to have on these projects to ensure that we're mitigating, we're doing our due diligence in terms of what's important to us and to the land, so that we continue to maintain our environment and that these projects are done in a very responsible manner. That's what's important to us. And I think if we didn't have that piece, then I don't think most First Nations would sign up for any of these major projects. And I think that's important.
Thank you. Crystal?
Turn that off, I think. Is it on? Okay. So the way we've been able to implement Haisla values and principles into projects, ultimately, for the first decisions that we made as a Cedar board were essentially the design of the project. So immediately our first decision was a floating facility so that there was less impact on the land. We also, and our experience through all the education we did as leadership, but also with our community, was the technologies that we had chosen in order to start the build and design of Cedar LNG, so air-cooled versus water-cooled. And all those types of decisions that we implemented right from the beginning were essentially decisions that we're not going to deter from in choosing our partners. So right from that aspect, we've implemented our values and have stuck through it throughout the last 5 years as being a board member of Cedar.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad we've gotten this out on the record. I'd like to maybe give each of you a chance to talk about what's new and exciting with your projects, because I see the Hoover questions are piling in. So, Crystal, you mentioned you're close to FID. Anything else you want to say about that?
That I'll have many sleepless nights from now until that decision is made. So every time I hear about it, I literally start shaking and getting goosebumps. But it has been quite the tremendous journey that I've been very fortunate to be able to have witnessed. And just want to thank every person in this room has ever had anything to do with this success. I see some of our team members sitting in the audience: Mike Eddy, Susan Bruckner. I've got a couple of councillors here, Byron Olson Grant and Greg Smith. It has taken our community a tremendous effort to get our project to the stage that we're at, and I definitely just want to enjoy the rest of the time that comes leading up to a final investment decision. So.
Very nice. And President Eva, you had some exciting stuff in the news. Can you tell everyone about that?
Thank you. The Nisga'a Nation recently had the first agreement on the pipelines that originally were that were destined for Prince Rupert. But we also wanted to do more on our territory. The agreement with Shell was announced on Monday. It's a 20-year agreement. And if more information is required, we have our team here that would be able to answer the more technical questions that may arise. But I wanted to speak about how the nation has been working diligently, not only with our people and our elders, but like Haisla, we were aware of our potential impacts that might be brought to our territory. And we know as a Nisga'a Nation that we care for the land cares for us. And like that, we also, looked at not leaving a footprint that would not be environmentally safe for our nation. But we're also looking at that floating facility. We do our work diligently with our council elders, our people, and our project team, as well as our partners on the environmental impacts that we mitigate. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's, Karen, you want to jump in on any of this for my next question? I'll just go to the next question and you can jump in any way you like. So the next question I was going to ask about is, I think all of you are involved in a lot of thought leadership work, and including through the First Nations Climate Initiative. And that initiative has put out a paper recently, I think in the context of the recent COP meetings in Dubai. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on that paper, its significance. President Eva, you were just talking about those environmental, well, all of you have talked about the environmental benefits and protection you want to see. So tell us about that paper and what its significance is. Karen? Everyone's pointing to you.
Well, I think that was the First Nations Climate Initiative that both Eva and Crystal are also a part of, but I was able to listen in on Dr. Robert Johnston's paper, and part of the paper was about how we can continue with LNG and what it means to Asian countries. And so from what I got, the gist of the paper was about, you know, countries that are still in need of LNG, Korea, Japan, the Asian countries. And so I think it's a well-researched paper. It's fact-based, and it's got a lot of good information I think BC should be looking at and adhering to what these experts are saying about what LNG means to BC and to Canada and to Asian countries as well. So I think go on to FNCI's website and read the paper. I think it's a well-informed paper.
All right. And I think that's a good segue. All of you have been involved in the last year or maybe more in talking to the international community about your projects, why you're doing them, etc. Karen, you were in China and just in COP as well. President Eva, you were very involved at the LNG 2023 conference that happened in Vancouver, and so were you, Crystal. So what have you, in all of these international engagements, number one, been saying to these folks, and what have you been hearing from them? What is the world saying to us and to you as First Nations? Karen?
Okay, I want to make some points here, so I'll start off with BC local, and then I'll circle back around to BC. I heard EB, I don't know if he's in the crowd, his support for LNG last night at his keynote, so I'm going to hold you to it. I have to put a plug in there and do my soapbox moment. I think with the First Nations LNG Alliance, it's the first and only organization of its kind in BC, in Canada, and in the world that's supporting responsible LNG, but we need to be funded appropriately. So I'll put that plug in. I've recently got invited to go to China on a trade mission in October. It was put out to apply. So 35 people applied with the Canada-China Business Council on a trade mission. And so there was 10 of us that were chosen to go. 5 people were from Treaty 1, and they had just recently won a court case for land settlement within urban Winnipeg. So they're looking for investments and to build their economy. And then we had a couple of fellows from northern Quebec working for First Nations there and looking at exports for cold water shrimp And then myself and Matt Vickers went along as well. And from my perspective, just listening to the news in BC and in Canada, LNG's out the back door. If it's at all possible, Canada and BC would want to just shove it out the back door and not fund us, hoping we'd just go away because of the emissions. But I think that a well thought out plan needs to happen in terms of how we can continue promoting LNG and how it's going to be the lowest emissions in Canada and in BC, and what it means to Asia, getting Asia off of coal. I went in 2015 with Christy Clark's trade mission. The smog was still the same from 2015 to last October. They're still burning coal. So from my perspective, we do need to think globally. We need to think about how I've learned a lot in this job, being a girl from the res, being a social worker, and then getting into this field. It's something I didn't aspire to, but for me, I'm passionate about it because what it means to our people on the ground. And I think, you know, going abroad to Beijing and seeing, we were given a presentation on how China still wants BC's natural resources. They still want our LNG. So BC and Canada need to hear those loud messages, because we're at an opportunity here, an economic opportunity that'll help us address our environmental issues, that'll help us address the greenhouse gas emissions globally. What I've also learned as well from the Canada Energy Centre, they put out a lot of good information on LinkedIn. China has the highest emissions at 30%, then India, and then the United States. Very high, 15%, 12%. And out of the world, Canada's at 1.5%. So from my perspective, it makes common sense for us to be helping Asia, helping Europe to get their greenhouse gas emissions down. So that was the gist of the Beijing trip, and I was enlightened. It gave me hope that I need to come home and tell BC this. I need to come home and tell Canada this, that we still need to promote LNG and how First Nations are going to be at the head of it. Some of you might have seen slogans at the airport. Canadian LNG is Indigenous LNG. None of these projects can go through without our Indigenous involvement and participation and consent. The other piece, what I learned at COP28 in Dubai, we listened to a lot of panels in different pavilions with different countries. And the biggest piece that I learned, well, first of all, there was an announcement on oil and gas caps for Canada. And I personally, I just cringed, because I'm thinking, we're just on this path here. We're just getting on this path with LNG, where we've never been at the table. And I use this analogy is that, you know, Indigenous people are finally at the table. We're ready to sit at this buffet of natural resources. And then we get our food pulled away because of, you know, oil and gas caps. And, you know, it just doesn't make sense to me. We're here at the table. We want to be served just as well. We want to take care of our communities. So going to COP28, I think oil and gas is still relevant, but I think it will help with some of the solutions with greenhouse gas emissions, particularly LNG. And I think that there's like offsets like hydrogen that come from it. And I think that that's part and parcel of the answer to some of our local concerns in BC on getting our greenhouse gas emissions down. So I think those were important talking points that I needed to bring out today. Nisga'a.
Thank you, Karen. I know Eva wants to jump in.
Thank you. The messaging that I get from the international world is that they need our LNG. The Germans, Japanese, all of them are wondering where they're going to get their, and why they're not getting gas from their allies. They're not getting gas from Russia. We have a responsibility as Canadians to help the world get off of the coal, to get off of the other sources of energy that affect our global climate. Thank you.
Crystal, did you want to add anything?
I think just to add on to what Karen's speaking about, I wasn't fortunate enough to take up any of the trips to international communities. However, I just wanted to talk about the importance of the context of thinking globally. And from an Indigenous perspective, we're continuously taught to take care of our environment, to take care of our land, and to take only what is required. And to think in a global context, I truly believe that in supporting LNG, the LNG industry, that we are in fact doing that. What is happening in Asia, what is happening around the world, our territories aren't protected from what is still occurring. So being a part of solutions to be able to provide countries like Asia and India with a cleaner burning energy, we are definitely becoming a part of the solutions. And I think the most common aspect when I did go to Ottawa with Energy for a Secure Future was that consistent message that Indigenous communities are not a part of the problem. We are actually a part of the solution in being that Canadian LNG is Indigenous LNG.
Thank you, Crystal. And no, I just want to thank all of you for the tremendous work you've all been doing to tell the world this story, and it's great that we can hear about it today. I want to turn to some of the questions from Huva, and one of them that got my attention in particular was a question around how your nations are collaborating with other First Nations, including ones in the upstream. So I think a lot of people know the story of your nations in terms of the LNG project, but there are nations on the pipeline, there are nations in the upstream. Can you talk about how you've built partnerships with other First Nations as you've done these projects? Crystal, you want to start?
Most definitely. So I'm also the chair of the First Nations LNG Alliance, so I can kind of answer this in two parts. One from the perspective of the nation and with Cedar LNG. As I stated in the opening comments around making some of the key decisions as the first Cedar board was essentially that we were going to perform above any other expectations of any other proponent that's operated in our territory. And the most key important aspect of that is building relationships with our neighboring communities that are directly impacted by our facility, so the coastal nations along the shipping route and within our territory. So I truly believe that we've done that aspect. We've built relationships with neighboring communities, and truly the first opportunity that we had to build a relationship was provided by sharing the opportunities that were provided by the construction and build of LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink. I think most Indigenous leaders in the room here today can reflect back to a time where we were very territorial, and whatever occurred in our territories was limited to the opportunities of that nation within those boundaries. And to think about when we think about a forward process, and I can speak for my community that we share a lot of the same social issues that Karen would see in her community and that Eva would see in their territory, that we wanted to be a part of extending that solution by providing career opportunities and just allow for the broader participation within the LNG and LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink opportunity. And we've been able to see, as I've taken tours of LNG Canada, I can see other joint ventures, other nations' logos within our territory. And that is a great, it's a great thing to see and to witness. So building partnerships has been key, and I truly believe that moving forward, it's going to be a part of the norm when building and constructing major projects, is that key relationship that we as Indigenous people need to take the opportunity to have and to share. Now, from a First Nations LNG Alliance perspective, that opportunity has always been there. We are always willing to extend our doors and to have the partnership, becoming board members of the Alliance. And we've made some key momentum moves by going national. And so any Indigenous leaders in the room that would see a benefit of becoming a part of our story and helping us educate Indigenous communities, not only in this province, but in Canada, please contact Karen. And she's willing to speak on panels as well, more so than me.
All right. Eva or Karen, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. The Nisga'a Nation has been building partnerships and relationships, not only with industry, but with our neighbors. All of the First Nations in the north. As Crystal has stated, we've evolved into a whole new era for the First Nations when she mentioned territorial. That brings back a lot of memories for me because everybody was in their own little box. Now we are all thinking outside of the box. We are working together for the benefit of our children. These major projects, every decision that we make is for the future of our children, the future of Canada, the world really, when you think about the kind of industry we're getting into, LNG. But for us, the door is always open for our neighbors. We continue to meet with the First Nations along our the coast, as Crystal has mentioned, but also further up into north of our territory. So we are doing our due diligence to do that. We are building those relationships. We have to, not only for the benefit of the world, but we have children, we have grandchildren that were born out of intermarriages into all of those nations. So we all have a vested interest in making a better world for our people and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Karen.
So a couple of points that I want to make. First, we had a session yesterday and we had a couple of speakers come to our session and talked about Indigenous businesses. So I want to put in a plug for Indigenous businesses that are working along any major project. I think that's sort of the path to go, is to support those Indigenous businesses because they don't get a lot of recognition. So for those of you that are owning your own businesses, working on major projects, we hear you, we see you. So we want to continue to promote that. The other piece I think that's important for Indigenous leaders is about really building those partnerships, because what I found during my tenure as leadership was that our active reached out to different nations. Let's partner on this, let's partner on this. And everybody's like this, like, no thank you. I want to get our own project and our own agreement, and we want money's just coming to us. For me, if we can do some partnerships across the board, everybody wins. Everybody gets a piece of the pie. So I think that's the process that we need to go with. The other piece that I've been seeing in Alberta, the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, they were able to sign an agreement, an equity ownership agreement with 23 First Nations. And that's powerful. If you can get 23 First Nations with diverse opinions, diverse whatever, that's a huge accomplishment. We have yet to do that here in BC. Put aside our differences, put aside, you know, our fears of why we don't want to partner with other nations. The bottom line is that our people, that's why we're elected into leadership. It's our people that we got to be concerned about, not my ego, not saying, you know, our council just wants our own agreement. We got to work together and really, truly partner and collaborate with other nations. Say.
So we're out of time, but and Crystal wants to take a selfie. One of the questions up here was, how can industry better support and amplify Indigenous voices? I'd say Crystal has already volunteered Karen to give speeches, so call her. Eva, or do you want to volunteer as well? Okay, never mind. But I want to thank you all for your insights and all the work that you do. And thank you all for being a great audience. And they'll be here, I think, for the next few days, so you can talk to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Before we, good, I'm glad the selfie. I'd like to invite Javad Azanji, the General Manager of Cisco Development, Caribou Gold Corp, to the stage to thank our speakers.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying the event as much as I do. I would like to, I'm being given this opportunity to thank this great panel. Not only the Indigenous panel, but I'm sure you noticed as well as I did, they're the only female panel that we had up here this morning. So let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. And just to let you know, my name is Javad Azanji. I'm the General Manager at Cisco Development, Caribou Gold Project. Our project is near the little town of Wells in BC. If you don't know where that is, that's close to historic Barkerville Village. If you don't know where that is, it's about 70 kilometers from Cornell. And again, it's a great event. It's great to be here, and enjoy your event, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Javad. Well, that concludes our morning session. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite you to the trade show area to enjoy a networking break provided by IUOE Local 115. And we'll see you back here for the forestry panel at 10 to 11. Just listen for the chimes. Thanks all.